On today's episode, we revisit the expansion draft, and did Seattle mess up, or were they doomed from the start? Let's talk about it on Locked On Kraken.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm Zaiem Beg, and I'm with Davy Jones Locker Room, where we cover the Seattle Torrent and the Seattle Kraken. And welcome to Locked On Kraken. Today, we're going to do a little stock up, stock down, check in on some of the players, and we're going to look at what's at stake against Edmonton tonight. Spoiler, it's a lot, but I wanted to talk about the expansion draft and revisit that because Vegas has been in the news recently, having just fired their third coach in franchise history, Bruce Cassidy, whom they won a Stanley Cup with just a couple of years ago in 2023. He had a 600 playoff win percentage. He had over a 600 win percentage in the regular season, but they have fired him. Now Vegas and Seattle get compared to each other because they were both in this recent round of expansion, and Vegas, they had immediate success. They had the expansion draft and no one thought they were going to be any good, but then they ended up making the Stanley Cup final in their very first year. And they have been a perennial Stanley Cup contender. They won the cup. They've made the playoffs every year of their existence, except for one. They're going to make the playoffs this year, despite firing their coach. Meanwhile, Seattle has not made the playoffs in every year of their existence. In fact, they have only made it in one of their years, in year two, and they are maybe making the playoffs this year. We will see what happens, and we'll talk about that in the next segment. But I wanted to push back on the idea that the conditions that were available for Seattle were the same for Vegas. And if Ron Francis had just done a better job, then he could have replicated the same success that Vegas had. And that's just simply not true. The reason for that is because these two expansions happened asynchronously. Vegas was 2017, Seattle was 2021. And when they announced expansion, the NHL was like, hey, surprise, next year we're expanding and there's an expansion draft. And teams, they didn't have their contracts in order. They didn't have their rosters set. They didn't have any warning, just the 1 year, that this thing is going to happen that is going to be so disruptive to every team's roster construction. And so you had things like older players, expensive players, they had no trade clause or no movement clauses. And so according to the rules of the expansion draft, you have to protect those players unless they waive them. The players are like, hey, I don't want to go to an expansion team, so I'm not going to waive my no movement clause. And then that meant that better players, cheaper players down the line were available. The other thing was, you now have 5 years to prepare versus 1. And so now they can have intentionality behind their contract extensions. And they know that expansion draft are coming, and they would put players in the minors, and they're trading people and setting things up. And you've got years to set this up. And so by the time Seattle was available to draft, those mistakes that the GMs made the first time, they learned from their mistakes and they weren't going to make them again. In the Vegas expansion, they were like, hey, we were caught off guard. And so instead of taking our 14th best player, will you take our 15th best player and we'll give you a first round draft pick for it? And Vegas was like, yes, I will happily accept a first round draft pick for taking a slightly worse player. They got so many of those deals. When the Kraken came to draft, there were no deals. The GM said, I'm not going to look stupid, and we're not going to do this again. This was a Black Friday sale. Vegas got there. They got there at 6 a.m., and they got the 80-inch TV for $5. And now that 80-inch TV made them the most popular house on the neighborhood. And they're holding parties, and they're big sporting events, and everyone shows up, and everyone's like, oh man, this is great. Like, I love this TV. And then you look at Seattle, like, how come, hey, where's your 80-inch TV? How come you didn't get your own for just $5? It's like, well, because the Kraken weren't allowed to enter the Black Friday store until 2 p.m. And by then, all the deals were gone. So what do? Well, you just make the best of what you have. And if you look at who is available and you revisit the expansion draft, you say, okay, well, if with the benefit of hindsight, Ron Francis should have taken this player or that player. Go back and look and tell me who would have changed this franchise meaningfully. Because the main names that were criticized was Ron Francis took Vince Dunn over Vladimir Tarasenko, who was coming off a major shoulder injury. Tarasenko was. And he was older, and the Blues shockingly left him unprotected. And then the Kraken did not take him, and they took the younger and ultimately better player in Vince Dunn. The other one was Carey Price, the goalie from Montreal, the former MVP, the Vezina winner, best goalie in the world. He's just available. He had a really, really, really high contract, big contract, a lot of term left, and Seattle did not take him. And I was like, how could Seattle turn down Carey Price? That is a superstar goalie. He could be the face of your franchise. He could be your Marc-Andre Fleury. The Vegas took Marc-Andre Fleury, and then he was the face of their franchise, and he won the Vezina, and they took him to the Stanley Cup final. And Carey Price, he can be that guy. And Ron Francis he foolishly took Cale Fleury over Carey Price. Well, Carey Price, his career was over. He was injured, and he never recovered from the injury, and he essentially never played again. So the blunder that Ron Francis made in the expansion draft by not taking these players that were ostensibly just so much better than what was available, if you look back, that's just not the case. And if you look at who Seattle took, none of these people are exactly household names here, but some of these is like, who are these people? Gavin Bayreuther and Carson Twarynski, and it's like I've not heard of some of these people, but the best players available in the expansion draft are the players that Seattle took. Jordan Eberle was available, and he was the clear pick, and they took him. Jared McCann was the clear pick from Toronto. Yanni Gourde from Tampa Bay. And Vince Dunn from St. Louis. Those were the 4 best players available in the expansion draft. And those were the 4 best players, or those were the 4 players taken by Ron Francis in the expansion draft. There were no side deals because all of their ducks had now been in a row for the GMs. And the Kraken, they said, hey, we would like draft compensation for things like Mark Giordano, the longtime Flames defenseman and the captain. And they were really heartbroken to leave him exposed. And I guarantee you that if that had happened in 2017, they would have given Seattle a draft pick to say, hey, don't take our captain, don't take Mark Giordano. But instead, they had to make the tough call, and they had to have a conversation with him, like, hey, we hope you understand. And then Seattle ended up flipping him at the trade deadline. Well, that's another thing that is not talked about enough, is that, on expansion draft day, Seattle did not make any deals. No deals were available, but they did end up turning a lot of those players that they drafted at the expansion draft into assets at the deadline. Most notably, Jeremy Lauzon, the not so great, let's say, defenseman from the Blues, who is big and physical, and that's what his skill set is being big and taking a lot of bad penalties. And they ended up getting a 2nd-round pick for him, which is just stunning. I remember talking to at the time, the site manager, David Jones' locker room, who his name is Dan Morris, and now he's works for the Mariners. And we were like, fifth round pick would be really nice. And then it was a second. And it's like, I thought I misheard, because I had NHL TV or NHL Network on, and I thought I misheard. And I was like, they misspoke and said second instead of seventh. No, it was a second round pick, and that second round pick was ended up being Yanni Newman. So, life isn't fair sometimes, and sometimes a team just gets to draft first. They get to expansion draft first, and they get to enjoy all the rewards, and then they get to salt the earth. And Seattle just never got that opportunity. So, it is what it is, and it's frustrating, but I think if you look back and you say, they could have taken, Nino Niederreiter, it's like, well, that's not changing the course of the franchise. It's like, they could have taken Luke Glendening. And it's like, okay, or Jacob Van Riemsdyk. It's like Shane Gostisbehere. I mean, these are names, right? But it's not like these are going to now propel the Kraken to being a Stanley Cup contender. And you can criticize a lot of the stuff that they did subsequently. But I think the expansion draft is presented as if it was a failure by Seattle because they didn't get the piñata of value that Vegas got. But that value was never there to begin with, and it was all a mirage. Speaking of mirages, hopefully the Seattle Kraken's playoff spots or playoff odds are not a mirage, but we will talk about what is at stake with their game tonight against Edmonton coming up next. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house, it's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets changes the game. It's people moving the action, so when momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but I never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer a spectator. Play-by-play, you decide. Trade every play with Robinhood. Now available across the U.S., download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swaps trading involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives LLC, a registered futures commission merchant and swap firm. Don't forget to check out the Everydayer Club for ad-free episodes and access to a group chat with other listeners of this show. Tap the link in the show notes or go to lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer. All right. Well, we got a big game coming up. Yeah, so let's take a look at the standings. Kraken currently sitting at 75 points in 10th place in the Western Conference. The Pacific Division getting third is essentially out of reach right now. They're not going to catch Vegas, barring anything extraordinarily strange, but the target is the 8th spot in the West for the second wild card and the privilege of getting to play Colorado in the first round, but we will hopefully cross that bridge when we get there. Seattle with 75 points, 2 points behind Nashville with 2 games in hand. Also, the Kings are 1 point ahead of them and have played one more game. San Jose tied with them at 75, and then Winnipeg is 1 point behind, and St. Louis 2 points behind, the Kraken having 1 game in hand against both the Jets and Blues. So what this means is that if you simulate out the season based on the team strength, we have roughly a 23% chance of the Kraken making the playoffs as it stands right now. If they win today, it will be somewhere around a 32.7 or 33% chance of making the playoffs. So like a 1 out of 3, that's like pretty reasonable. If they lose in regulation, it drops down to under 14%. And so this is about a 20% playoff swing. It's in between winning and losing in regulation. It's a big deal. Now, A couple of notes. First of all, Shane Wright did practice today. Practice yesterday. He sustained an injury in the last game. He left the game and didn't return, but so he may be available. Jaden Schwartz was also practicing after he has missed a handful of games after sustaining an injury to the head when he was hit in the head with the skate. It was the side of the skate. It wasn't a cut. Also, Oilers superstar and not so gentlemanly German is Leon Draisaitl, who is out with a lower body injury and is the second best player on the team. But of course, we can't talk about the Oilers without talking about Connor Ingram, the starting goalie. And the Oilers, their big problem has been goaltending. And so the Oilers are gettable. Connor Ingram he's not Andrei Vasilevsky. He's not Sergei Bobrovsky. He's not one of these elite goaltenders. So you can throw some pucks at the net. Just get that shooting mentality. Really channel your inner Edzo and get shots to the net and see what happens. You don't have to set up that perfect shot. You don't have to try to get that thing to get a high glove side, because you know that Andrei Vasilevsky is covering all of the ground underneath, all the space underneath low, and you have to really pick your spots. Here, you don't got to do that. All you got to do is just go in and just really, it sounds so cliche, but just get shots to the net. Now, I want to really underscore the importance here of winning, because the playoff cut line is going to be around 90 points. If the Kraken get to 90 points, they will almost certainly be in, just based on the way the Pacific Division and how it breaks out. That means that they need 15 points in 10 games. It's a lot. That means they can only drop 5 points in the remaining 10 games. And if we look at their schedule, this is a simulation, or these are my simulation odds, and they gotta, they can't even withstand 3 regulation losses. We're only 2. Now you can say that the Oilers, their win percentage is actually a little bit higher, or the expected win percentage for the Kraken is a little bit higher, because this is based on having Leon Draisaitl. And that Avalanche game at the end of the season at 24%, that might be higher as well, because Colorado will likely have nothing to play for. And so they will just kind of take it easy. Now, that is on the second day of a back-to-back, and it's still an NHL team. It's still Colorado. And as we saw against the Florida Panthers the other day, when the Kraken play against a shorthanded team, it does not mean that they are automatically going to win. So I've been assigning that game at 50%, the Colorado game, which means if the Kraken win tonight, realistically, probably like above a third to get in. That's really, that's a pretty good spot to be in. And although it feels so like we're stuck in the mud this year in trying to make the playoffs and trying to generate offense, the Kraken, because of the historically weak division, they're right there with it, because guess what? Fans of all the other teams, they're going through it too. And they're frustrated just like everybody else. And they're like, why can't our team win? Why can't our team grab this playoff spot that is just like, does anyone want to make the playoffs? Or are they trying to forfeit it and you just give it to like an Eastern Conference team? But despite the frustration and despite the angst and the Sturm and Drang, the Kraken, if they win tonight and they take advantage of, a team that has also not played well, because they're a Pacific Division team, and therefore they're not playing well. You win that 1-1, man, they're right in it. They really feel like they're right in it. And the schedule it gets a little easier. I mean, Minnesota's tough, but Vegas, they got 2 games against Vegas, and they just fired their coach. The Blackhawks and Flames are reeling. We already talked about Colorado maybe taking it easy that game. Okay, a bunch of stuff still has to go right. That game against the Kings on April 13th seems massive, but they can do it. It's not out of the realm of possibility at all. A couple weeks ago, they were like at 7%. They win tonight, they're at 33. That's huge, right? And that's the importance of getting that point in Florida and getting that point in Buffalo and getting those 2 points in Tampa Bay. It's just like, when we talk about every point is huge. That's why. I mean, they don't have a lot of margin for error, so they have to collect as many points as possible. But the fact they did get a point in Buffalo, they did get a point in Florida, well, those matter. Those are banked and they add up, and now they're very, very relevant. So, a lot better spot, I think, than where they were a couple of weeks ago or a week ago, especially after losing to Nashville again. Seemed pretty bleak. I mean, it's not great still, but it's doable. And the Kraken are playing relevant games in March and in April, and that's what we want, right? We don't want to just go into the meaningless stretch of the season, which is what we had to endure in previous years. At this point last year, it was just like, well, what are we doing? We're just playing out the string and just hoping to get to the end of the season. Here we have real meaningful stakes, real high stakes here. I mean, 33%. You win tonight, you're 1 out of 3 to get in the playoffs, and then you just keep that rolling. I mean, okay, granted, I did do a deep dive on momentum last week and showed that winning doesn't actually help you keep things rolling. But you know what? We're going to use the expression anyway. So, well, an expression that some people use, I suppose, is stock up or stock down. And we're going to take a look at that and talk about a few Kraken players who are maybe doing better or worse than you might think. All right, let's do some stock up and stock down. So first of all, I wanted to talk about Chandler Stevenson. Stock up, stock down, stock up. I have been so impressed with Chandler Stevenson recently after being not so impressed with Chandler Stevenson the previous couple of years, or at least the year plus since he signed with Seattle last year. So this is his second year with the Kraken. And he was, with regards to expected goal share, was arguably the worst player in the NHL last year. When he was on the ice, teams were generating more shots or generating higher quality shots closer to the net. And the Kraken were generating offense at a lower rate than they were with other players on the ice, controlling for teammates. Meanwhile, he is getting all of this ice time. He's on the power plays, on the penalty kill. He's, of course, getting 5-on-5 time. He's getting a ton of minutes. He is the 2C. He has supplanted Shane Wright as the 2C, which then affected his development. Chandler Stevenson also is signed a contract north of $6 million, and the Kraken were cap-strapped last year. So it was not a good scene. And then this year, similar stuff with the expected goal numbers and allowing more shots, allowing closer shots, allowing higher quality shots. And I've been really critical, and certainly I'm not the only one. Now, there are things he does really, really well. I know the broadcast team really likes him. He is a very good passer. He's a very good skater. It's not like this guy is without merit, but he just, when he was on the ice, other teams, they just got to win a little bit more. Now they got to generate a little bit more offense, and they got a little less defensive resistance and a little less offensive resistance. Well, since the Olympic break, Chandler Stevenson has found his role. And he's on that line with Bobby McMahon and Capo Caco. And he has been really just very good in I was gonna say exceptional, but I don't think I'm willing to go that far. But he has been exception-ish. And I think that his role as a distributor, that lets him play into what he wants to do. He wants to, just find the open guy. And I remember it was Andre Burakovsky, I think, said that he really liked how Chandler Stevenson's mind is quiet. He always plays with a quiet mind. He doesn't have any panic to him. He's just real easygoing and just plays with an even keeled, the world can be on fire around him. And he's like, you know what? I'm Chandler Stevenson. And whether you like that Chandler Stevenson or not, that's who he is. And he's been good. He's been really good. I've been really impressed. So stock up for Chandler Stevenson. Shane Wright. Let's talk about Shane Wright. Shane Wright is, unfortunately, we're going to have to go stock down. Shane Wright is, his development, I think, was in part affected by Chandler Stevenson's arrival. Now, talking to some people around the organization, there's some thought that when Shane Wright arrived to this franchise, his ceiling was capped. And maybe the reason why he fell to 4th overall when he was the presumptive number 1 overall pick for the previous 2 years. And then when draft day came, he was available at 4, which is where Seattle took him. And that's how they ended up with him. He then was in this weird development cycle where he was not allowed to play in the AHL because he was too young, and it was part of the CHL NHL agreement, and so he could he couldn't play for the Kraken, or he couldn't play for the Firebirds, which is really where he needed to be. And so it was either playing in the OHL where he just didn't need to be there because he's far too good, or play on the Kraken, who at the time saw themselves as a playoff team because they had just made the playoffs. And so they were like, well, we don't want to treat this as a developmental league, because the NHL is not a developmental league. The AHL is, but he couldn't play there because of the rules. Now those rules are being addressed, but that doesn't help Shane Wright in his development. And then he also missed a development time because the season was canceled because of COVID. And now he is just not been the kind of player that I think anyone expected him to be or thought he was going to be. His ceiling was the next Patrice Bergeron. And while I think that maybe he finds that level somewhere, I mean, not full Patrice Bergeron, because Patrice Bergeron is an incredible player, and that's asking too much of anybody. But it just doesn't seem to have a great role in Seattle right now. Lane Lambert's system doesn't really seem to be suiting him well. And I do wonder if he is going to be moved this summer as part of a roster overhaul, which this team really does need. Jacob Melanson, let's talk about him. I'm going to go hold even. So Jacob Melanson came on the scene and he started hitting everything that moved. And you saw here, he had 12 hits in a game, 10 hits in a game. Well, recently that has fallen off, and I do wonder how much that is a function of maybe you're injured, because when you throw your body around recklessly all the time, that is a really hard style of play to sustain. And he's out there. The fourth line has been great. When he's been in the lineup, he's been in and out of the lineup because the Kraken have too many forwards. But Ryan Winterton, who was missed away from the team right now after the very tragic passing of his brother. Jacob Melanson, he's there on the fourth line now, and his hits, they've gone down. You're getting the 4 and the 3. You're not getting the 8 and 6 and 7 and 10s but overall, I don't think this is like a huge departure from where he's been. Yeah, he's hitting a little bit less, but overall, he's still bringing a good, aggressive forecheck, and he's creating chaos. And the fourth line, whatever the configuration has been, assuming it does not involve Yanni Newman. Sorry, Yanni Newman, but you don't belong on the fourth line. You should be up on like the second line. Play next to Chandler Stevenson. He'll set you up. Ryan Winterton, I'm not saying bye. But I'm also not saying sell. So hold steady on you, Jacob Melanson. You just do your thing, and you'll be okay. And whatever's ailing you, if your body hurts, hopefully you heal up. And if the playoffs come, then it's playoff time. So you just got to bring it. Well, that does it for today's show, and we will be back tomorrow to talk about what is hopefully a big win over the Oilers and the Kraken's 1 in 3 chances of making the playoffs. So thank you for tuning in to Locked On Kraken. Make sure you subscribe and follow us so you get all the latest episodes. You can find me at Davey Jones LR or on all social media platforms. And if you never miss an episode, the Everyday Club is built for you. Get Locked On Kraken ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. For those of you on video, we send you to the first ever 24/7 National Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. On audio, make sure this is one of your 2 daily listens for Davey Jones Locker Room. I'm Zaiem Beg, and I will see you tomorrow.